And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast.
Flibbity-jibbity nonsense.
I thought it was terrific.
Not just big, it's yeah!
Let's go!
Welcome, and thanks for listening to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. My name is Jeff Morey, and I'm your host. It's been a while, so time for another paranormal show this week. And what better show to do and place to talk about than my backyard, Haunted Appalachia. For anyone who's not familiar with that term, I'm referring to the Appalachian mountain range, which encompasses the Catskill Mountains to the north and south into the Blue Ridge Mountains and Great Smoky Mountains. As far as geographical regions go, Appalachia might be arguably the most haunted region in the country, apart from maybe the Uinta Basin in Utah and part of California. Even before I moved to the region, I have long heard of so many of the legends and lore of the region, and there are so many chilling and terrifying stories to have long come from this area. So for this episode, I will be talking about some of the most fascinating creatures, cryptids, UAP activity, disappearances, and haunted locations that are unique to this amazing region of our country. So stay tuned, because if you love ghost stories and are fascinated with the paranormal, you'll enjoy this one. But before we get into that, let's first do a quick roundup of some of this week's big news stories. And I can't talk about news stories without talking about the leaked intelligence from the Signal group chat that liberals are going crazy over this week. For any of you that haven't heard about this story, President Trump's National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, inadvertently added Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, to a group chat between high-ranking members of the government, supposedly about military plans to attack terrorist cells in Yemen. Democratic lawmakers are fuming and have called the situation an astonishingly cavalier approach to national security. Trump initially said earlier this week, quote, "Michael Waltz has learned his lesson, and he's a good man," and his claim that he will not fire Waltz and that Goldberg's presence in the chat had no impact at all on the strikes. Early reports indicated that one of Waltz's staffers may have added Goldberg's name into Waltz's phone and contributed to how he was accidentally added to the group chat. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has claimed that, quote, "Nobody was texting war plans." Since the news first broke, The Atlantic has since published screenshots of supposed texts from Hegseth to the other top officials that show times and coordinated plans, as well as what attack aircraft and munitions will be deployed and when. I must admit, if true, this is pretty surprising that our top security and defense officials would use an unclassified messaging app to talk about classified intelligence information. I just don't see this as being plain black and white myself. Regardless of what Democrats might say, I just don't see Trump's team being this dumb and careless. I think this situation was purposely manipulated somehow to try and embarrass the Trump administration. That's just my thoughts anyway. In other political news this week, in a shocking announcement on Thursday, President Trump announced that he is pulling New York Representative Elise Stefanik's nomination to be the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. In a statement, Trump stated, "I have asked Elise, as one of my biggest allies, to remain in Congress to help me deliver historic tax cuts, great jobs, record economic growth, a secure border, energy dominance, peace through strength, and much more, so we can make America great again. With a very tight majority, I don't want to take a chance on anyone else running for Elise's seat. The people love Elise, and with her, we have nothing to worry about come Election Day." Trump is referring to and referencing the extremely slim 220 to 215 majority that Republicans currently hold over Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Between the New York congressional district and a reported very tight race in Florida's 1st and 6th congressional districts, where the seats previously held by Matt Gaetz, who is retiring from politics, and Michael Waltz, Trump's new national security advisor, whom we just talked about, are both up for grabs in 2 special elections. Both are in deep red Trump territory, but a recent surge in Democrat campaign spending and early voter turnout has Republicans on edge. In my opinion, Democrats flipping either of these 2 seats would be brutal for Republicans heading into midterm elections, as it could possibly signal that voters aren't pleased with President Trump's performance in office thus far. Hopefully, Republicans maintain control of both seats. In world news on Friday, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit war-torn Myanmar on Friday, killing hundreds and prompting the nation's military junta to ask for international aid and assistance. The earthquake hit the corner of Southeast Asia, sending tremors through villages and hitting as far as the Thai capital of Bangkok. Tremors were even felt as far away as southwest China, in the remote Yunnan province. Myanmar has mostly been shut off from the world for the last few years, as they have been wrapped up in a civil war. The leader of Myanmar's military government declared a state of emergency and issued an open invitation to all nations and organizations to come and help and provide aid. The U.S. Geological Survey early estimates say the final death toll could surpass 10,000 people. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone affected by the earthquake and their families. We're praying for your safety. This week, Elon Musk sold his social media site X to his artificial intelligence company, XAI, in a $33 billion all-stock deal. Both companies are privately held, so they do not have to disclose their finances to the public. In a statement, Elon said, "The combined company will deliver smarter, more meaningful experiences to billions of people while staying true to our core mission of seeking truth and advancing knowledge." Okay, just a procedural move, I'm assuming. I'm not a trader or an economist, so I personally don't know how that will affect anything, but my guess is it will have some serious tax implications. All right, basketball fans, we're heading into the end of the NCAA tournament with the Elite Eight matchups nearly set. My Tennessee Vols pulled out an impressive 78-65 win late Friday night to seal a win and seat in the Elite Eight. This after all those embarrassing losses to Kentucky earlier this season. At least they won when it mattered most. As of the airing of this show, Michigan State, Tennessee, Texas Tech, Florida, Duke, and Alabama will also advance. Good luck to everyone and go Vols. Okay, I think that just about covers everything in the news this week, at least the important stuff. So now let's talk about haunted Appalachia. Man, do the hills have eyes. Sorry, I couldn't resist. There's so many stories in this region and so much history, I could do a series of shows on this topic. So where do we start? Well, let's start with a couple of stories from my home state of Tennessee. Do you believe in witches? There are a lot of people all across the world who practice witchcraft and are most often rooted in nature-based spirituality and are often of Wiccan or from neo-pagan traditions. We've all heard of the Salem witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts, but have you ever heard of the legend of the Bell Witch? As the legend goes, in the early 1800s, the Bell family, who lived in Adams, Tennessee, about 45 minutes northwest of Nashville, were harassed by an invisible spirit that could speak, shapeshift, and be in multiple places at once, that would later be known as the Bell Witch. According to the legend, the entity would physically and verbally abuse members of the Bell family, especially John Bell and his daughter Betsy. But enslaved workers and even neighbors also reported encounters with the witch as well. Former President Andrew Jackson was said to have spent the night with some of his men during the Revolutionary War and quoted as saying, "I would rather face the entire British Army than spend another night with the Bell Witch." Witnesses claim the witch often took the form of a dog-like creature with 2 heads. It is said that the witch poisoned John Bell and killed him, after which the hauntings ended just as mysteriously as they began. Today, tourists and paranormal researchers flock to the Adams Farm to see the Bell Witch Cave and John Bell Cabin and hope to have a paranormal experience of their own. I did a show for Halloween in October called The Most Haunted Places in America. And one of the absolute most haunted locations is only about an hour and a half drive from where I live in East Tennessee, in a tiny rural town called Petros. Brushy Mountain opened its doors in 1896, following the Coal Creek War, which was a lockout of coal miners that protested the use of unpaid convict leasing in the local coal mines. Tennessee would later abolish the convict labor system and construct the Brushy Mountain Mine Prison. Convicts could work the coal mines on site, farm, and built a railroad spur, and at the end of Tennessee's convict lease arrangements on January 1st, 1896, 210 of those prisoners became the first inmates at the prison. The prison was built by prisoner labor, which originally was a wooden structure, but replaced with a stone castle-like structure in the early 1920s. It was renowned for being nearly impossible to escape due to the steep mountainous terrain, and one of the only successful escape attempts was that of James Earl Ray, the man who murdered Martin Luther King. Brushy Mountain is said to be one of the most haunted locations in the entire country, and visitors have reported being scratched, shoved, and growled at. While we don't have unequivocal proof of some of the stories told about the violent deaths at Brushy Mountain, the stories still persist, including that of a fight that broke out in the cafeteria between two inmates, leaving one of the two inmates chopped up into so many pieces that the guards flushed parts of him down the toilet. Another story is that of Leroy. Stories say that inmates stabbed him to death in the exercise area while he turned his back to them doing pull-ups. Another is of Jack Jett, a prison snitch who was stabbed 19 times in the neck. The ghosts of both men are said to haunt the property still to this day. There have been so many paranormal investigations done here, with hit TV shows such as Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and pop star Kesha's show, Conjuring Kesha, which was actually pretty good, believe it or not, all having filmed episodes here. I still haven't made it out to Brushy myself, and it's definitely on my to-do list in the near future. Moving up to the north one state, Kentucky is home to some of the weirdest stories and most paranormal hotspots in all of Appalachia. There are crazy cryptid stories such as that of the sheep squatch and the Kentucky wild man. Sheep squatch is one that I hear about and have seen some TV episodes about. The sheep squatch is supposedly a half man, half sheep like creature that is reported to roam the dense forests and mountains of Kentucky and West Virginia. Now, the sightings and claims seem pretty far out there, but in the early 1990s, there were a surge of reported sightings, with some saying it charged them and a couple of Kentucky guys claiming on the TV show Monsters and Mysteries in America that one attacked their camper and that they shot the creature. Although there has never been any actual concrete evidence to support the claim of the sheep squatch, people have reported the smell of sulfur associated with the creature, which has also long been associated with demonic activity. So could that help explain the possibility of there actually being something to the legend and the sightings? Maybe, maybe not. The Kentucky Wild Man is, spoiler alert, a local legend about basically just a very aggressive Bigfoot said to roam eastern Kentucky. It's long been reported and has been investigated by TV series such as Finding Bigfoot and the Animal Planet series Call of the Wild Man. Again, no credible evidence has ever been found, but reports date back hundreds of years and are also rooted in Native American lore. Kentucky is also home to one of the most infamous reported close encounters with extraterrestrial beings in history, the Kelly Green Man case, as it is now known. ufologists regard it as one of the best documented cases in history, while skeptics claim it was just a case of misidentification and say the Kelly family mistook alien beings for great horned owls. Anyways, as the story goes, on August 21st, 1955, 7 children and 5 adults arrived at the Hopkinsville, Kentucky police station, claiming that small alien beings had attacked their farmhouse. 2 of the men, Billy Ray Taylor and Elmer Sutton, also claimed that they had successfully held them off by shooting at them for over 4 hours, and that the aliens had repeatedly popped up in doorways and windows. The aliens were reported to be between 2 to 4 feet tall, with slits for mouths, claw-like hands, and eyes that glowed yellow. What is interesting about this case is, number one, 4 city cops, 5 state troopers, 3 deputy sheriffs, and 4 military police officers from nearby Fort Campbell all showed up to investigate. And number 2, this took place in 1955, a year that saw a huge spike in UFO sightings and reports. Many conspiracy theorists have claimed that former President Dwight D. Eisenhower actually met with extraterrestrials and signed some kind of a treaty. But if you've talked to your grandparents or people that lived in that time, I'm sorry, but people back then were just genuinely more honest, good people. Now, I'm not substantiating this case. I'm just saying there wasn't social media and the desire for fame and money the same as it is today. Either way, it's an interesting story if you have the time to look into it. Another very interesting story that I actually had never heard of until I started doing some research for this episode is that of the Old Stone Church grave in Clemson, South Carolina. The Old Stone Church was established in 1789. The current structure was built in 1802 and is currently listed on the National Register of Historic Places. There is a grave in the cemetery that belongs to Eliza Huger, and it is said that Eliza was a powerful witch who was killed for heresy, although no one knows for sure. Regardless, this particular grave is fascinating because there are many cracks in it. Plants around her tomb always die, and the grave has been struck by lightning multiple times. The stone on her tomb has been replaced multiple times, and no matter how often it's replaced, it always ends up getting cracked. The next time I'm in South Carolina, I definitely want to go to Clemson and check out the church and the graveyard and see her grave for myself. Moving back up north now, let's talk about haunted West Virginia. The state is so haunted that there's actually a town called Scary. Fact. But there are so many different haunted locations in West Virginia, it's, well, scary. In fact, one town is reportedly so haunted that there was an entire TV show completely dedicated to just this one town. Shepherdstown, West Virginia, is about an hour-and-a-half drive northwest of D.C. and sits right near the West Virginia-Maryland state line. Apart from Savannah, Georgia, Shepherdstown may just be the most haunted town in America. Between the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and the French and Indian War, unsolved crimes and tragic accidents, there's no shortage of death and suffering here. In 2016, TV network Destination America filmed the show I was referring to titled Ghosts of Shepherdstown there. Supposedly, the chief of police called in 3 paranormal investigators to help the police investigate strange 911 calls. I feel like I started to watch this show at some point but never finished it. Oh well, maybe I'll look into it again sometime. In Weston, West Virginia, lies the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. The asylum was first built in the 1800s, but construction was halted in 1858 so that the grounds could be used by Union soldiers. When it was built, it was intended to house 250 patients, but by the 1950s, it was housing close to 2,400. So you can imagine what conditions were like having that many people crammed into such a small space. Over the years, people have reported seeing shadow figures, hearing screams and echoes, and hearing doors slam with no one else around. The property is a hotbed for paranormal investigations, and hit TV shows such as Ghost Adventures, Portals to Hell, Destination Fear, and Expedition X have all filmed and done investigations here. And of course, we can't talk about West Virginia and the paranormal without talking about the infamous Mothman. You've all heard of the story of the Mothman, right? I'd be shocked if anyone, even those that aren't interested in the paranormal, haven't at least heard about the story and events surrounding it. In November of 1966, two couples and some gravediggers first claimed to see the creature, which was reported to be about 6 or 7 feet tall, donning a 10-foot wingspan and glowing red eyes. According to eyewitnesses, it could fly at speeds up to 100 miles per hour, and some eyewitnesses claimed to have seen it flying beside their cars and even landing on the hood and gazing down at them. Sightings continued, and on December 15, 1967, the silver bridge that connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed, and 46 people died from either drowning, hypothermia, or being crushed by the wreckage of the bridge, in what to this day is the worst and deadliest bridge collapse in U.S. history. Local eyewitnesses had placed the Mothman on the bridge in the days prior to its collapse, and thus the Mothman was permanently linked to the bridge collapse, with many saying it was a bad omen, that it was even trying to warn the residents of Point Pleasant of the impending collapse. Either way, the story of the Mothman is so deeply embedded in the history and culture of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, that to this day, there's a statue of the Mothman and even a museum in Point Pleasant dedicated to it. If you want to learn more about the story and some backstories and events you may not know about, I mentioned earlier that TV show called Monsters and Mysteries in America. They did an episode called The John Keel Files that gives a very detailed account of the events and people from the investigation who spent the most time and did the most research into the events. Of course, speaking of unexplained creatures, Bigfoot is reported to be sighted all over Appalachia, and there are also reports of feral people, which are people who have been isolated from human contact from a very young age, and they're reported to live in the wild, lack basic language and communication skills, don't bathe, and sometimes are very hairy. Thus, the misidentification with people thinking they might be a Bigfoot. If you think this is just a legend, think again. Folks around here will tell you, feral people are real, and some are still out there. I did a show a few weeks back titled, Is Bigfoot Real?, in which I spoke about them in depth. There's a story of a boy named Dennis Martin, who disappeared from the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, very close to where I live, in 1969. Without retelling the entire story, he vanished without a trace, and the Park Service would launch the biggest manhunt in history at the time to search for him. The interesting thing is they brought in Army Green Berets as part of the search effort. I'm sorry, people, but they don't bring in Army Special Forces troops for simple search and rescue missions. Everyone around here knows they brought them in to hunt for and eradicate the feral people in the region. Reportedly, the FBI had known about their existence for quite some time, but left them alone because they hadn't, up until this point, harmed anyone that they knew of. Literally hundreds of people have gone missing from national and state parks in Appalachia. I personally attribute at least some of those disappearances to feral people. Okay, the last thing I wanted to talk about was a phenomenon that had been going on since the early 1900s. At least that's when the first documented reports originated. In the Pisgah National Forest in the vicinity of Brown Mountain in western North Carolina is a phenomenon called the Brown Mountain Lights. The Brown Mountain Lights are said to be phantom ghost lights that appear randomly and look like glowing orbs that move or float over the mountains. Theories of the lights range from UFOs to the lanterns of Cherokee maidens searching for falling warriors to the ghosts of Civil War soldiers. Scientists have tried to debunk the sightings, claiming that they are train headlights, homes on the ridge, or bioluminescence. But if you've ever watched videos of the lights, or even better, been lucky enough to witness them yourself, then to me it's clear that the scientific explanations seem pretty dumb to the trained observer. There are lots of clips on YouTube and social media if you want to have a look for yourself. Or even better, there are a couple of lookout spots in the area that you can go and watch for yourself. The Brown Mountain Overlook is on North Carolina 181, about 15 minutes from the Linville Falls community. And there's another one called Wise Man's View in Linville Gorge. So what of Bigfoot, the Mothman, all the disappearances and UFO sightings in Appalachia? How can all this activity be explained? Well, one possible explanation is the proximity to some major military bases in the area. For one, Fort Campbell is a U.S. Army base located on the Kentucky-Tennessee border that is home to the 101st Airborne Division and 106th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Fort Campbell is the second largest U.S. military base, housing over 27,000 soldiers and 51,000 family members. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, while not technically in the Appalachian mountain range, is very close and has long been rumored to be the site where alien spacecraft are stored and alien technology may even have been reverse engineered. There are also some rumored secret bases deep in the mountains that are classified and only known about by a very select few and concealed from the public. The remoteness of the area would make for an ideal place to conceal top secret military facilities. For years, there have been rumors of the U.S. military experimenting with human-animal chimeras, and it has been proven that the government has indeed done experiments and research on them. And UFO activity has long been linked to military bases, where there always seems to be an abnormal amount of extra activity in these areas, especially bases that house nuclear weapons. Could this help explain the Mothman, Bigfoot, the sheep squatch, and other creatures that have long been spotted and reported in the mountains of Appalachia, and all the UFO activity? Maybe so. One thing is for sure, we will never know the extent of what they have experimented on and why. And I'm starting to think we'll never know the truth behind possibly the biggest secret in history, the existence of extraterrestrial life. All right, that's my show for this week. Thanks for joining me. And please, as I do some more paranormal themed shows, let me know what's interesting to you and what subjects and topics you want me to talk about and investigate. I hope to be having some more guests joining me in the near future and get some expert opinions and analysis on some of these subjects as well. Again, thanks for listening, and please look me up on social media on Facebook or X. Until next week.
Thank you for listening to the Politics, Prepping, and Paranormal Podcast. Your source for real news and analysis on politics, prepping, paranormal, conspiracy theories, and the volatile state of the world we live in. Tune in next week and every week for a new episode, and stay safe, stay healthy, and stay vigilant.